Welcome to the podcast where relationships, confidence, and determination all converge into an amazing, heartfelt experience. This is Speaking from the Heart.
Welcome back to episode number 114 of Speaking from the Heart. Today we have Casey Weiss with us, and Casey is a certified holistic nutritionist and life coach who lives in Northern California. She runs her practice, Your Case for Wellness, where she offers private and group coaching services. After almost a decade of struggling with eating disorders and body image issues, she knew that must be a better way to approach health. This is what propelled her back to studying nutrition. Casey focuses on working with women who are ready to stop the yo-yo struggle and finally make peace with food in their bodies. She helps women to learn to eat in a way that promotes overall health as well as weight loss. She found that what was missing in the health coaching space were coaches and programs that emphasize the importance of mindset and holistic behaviors in tandem with food and exercise. She now coaches women from all over the world on how they can truly feel their best from the inside out and stress less about food so they can live their life to the fullest. And I have to say, this really spoke to the heart of not only my struggles, which, for those that don't know me personally, have always struggled with weight and trying to feel comfortable about my body image, but also gets to the heart of a lot of things that we often take for granted about eating and why we even binge eat for that matter. I think Casey has the right idea when she talked about in today's episode of the importance of working in tandem with not just what we have as that nutrition plan, but also working on the mental mindset that is often missing, that often leads us back into those temptations that we should never have. But what I love about this the most is that when we get to the heart of really what is going on, not only with this sort of epidemic that we have as problems with our food and trying to disassociate with it, but it really helps us to understand that we can do this in a creative combination sense, which I will let her tell you what that is all about. But with that, let's go to the episode. All right, we're here with Casey Weiss. Casey, thanks for sharing your heart with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you are too, and I had already let the audience know a little bit about your background, and I think the biggest pressing question that I'm sure people are asking themselves right now is, what got you into struggling with your body image and just having issues with food? Because I don't know about you, but if you're looking at me, I look like a very plump person. So I have the opposite problem, and I'm kind of working on that. But I'm kind of curious what you have been through to get to where you are today.
Yeah, so it started when I was back in high school. And for so much of my life, I was just very active. I grew up in a home where my mom didn't emphasize dieting, but did provide a lot of balanced and healthy options as well as treats in my own home. But I ended up going actually on a trip to Ecuador, a community service trip. And it was the first time I started noticing other girls not finishing the food on their plate. And I was like, should I not be finishing the food on my plate? And it kind of started out of this comparison, very common for a teenage girl, right? And I started to restrict, but not in an obsessive way. And then when I came back from this trip, I got a lot of notice because I had lost weight and I was getting noticed for my body in a way that I hadn't before. And I kind of fueled off of getting that attention. And it led into a spiral of severe restriction. And what ended up happening, though, was I went down that path for several years. And then eventually my body was rebelling because after that restriction, that deprivation, my body was like screaming that it needed more fuel. My hormones were completely imbalanced. My metabolism had completely tanked. And I needed fuel, so to speak. And so it got to a point where I felt like I wasn't able to ignore my hunger cravings that I once was able to kind of not listen to. And then that led to a cycle of overeating and feeling like I was out of control with food. But I kept thinking like, okay, my solution is just to go back to my old ways, just restrict, just go back on my FitnessPal, calorie counting everything, restricting to a very, very low calorie count. But what ended up happening is I would maybe do that for a day, a couple days, whatever. And then all of a sudden these urges would come back. And I kept trying to fight myself internally because I was just so obsessed with being this smaller version of myself. I thought that would equate my self-worth. I thought that was beauty. And I continued on this cycle for a long time until I realized that something had to change. And I was introduced to the concept of intuitive eating, which, if you're not familiar with intuitive eating is a practice that has 10 main principles, but focuses on anti-diet and how you can more listen to your body. And this really helped me to quiet the diet police. It really helped me to understand better my hunger and fullness cues. It really helped me to be able to make peace with food. But at the same time, I still wasn't where I wanted to be with my body. I had gained weight to a point that I felt uncomfortable in my own body. And so that's when I kind of dove into the holistic route. I worked with a holistic practitioner and was able to see how I cannot be obsessive. I cannot be dieting, but I don't have to not think about food either, because I'd always been passionate about nutrition and about food in general. So this way I was able to understand, like, okay, there's nothing wrong with focusing on foods that fuel you, that make you feel good, that provide you energy, that help balance your blood sugar, your hormones, and help to accomplish your aesthetic goals. But we can also do that in a way that's not obsessive, not restrictive, not counting anything. And it's once I was able to understand that there could be balance of this, that everything like really clicked for me. It wasn't like just the intuitive. It wasn't dieting by any means. And with that, I got so inspired to go back and get my own nutrition certifications and then go on to coach women to be able to have these similar success stories.
You mentioned something about traveling and seeing the plight of actually other women or even other people actually having less food. And I'm kind of curious, just your observations and your curiosity with this, because I feel like even here in the United States, when we think about food, we think about these images, and this goes back to even times when we were looking at magazines, we were looking at pop icons. They're ones that are super slim, super thin. And even for me, on the masculine side, like these guys that have big muscles, they are able to do all kinds of things. Do you think that plays a big role in what you work with, especially with clients that are women in nature that might be trying to also get over that stigmatism that might have been surrounded by all these different images growing up?
Absolutely. The images are pervasive and we really can't escape them. They've always been present, right? In magazines, on posters, but now we see them in our feed 24/7. And so this is affecting our personal body image and also distorting our perception of reality, because so much what we do, what we post online, like who posts a picture of themselves that doesn't make them look good? And that's not even including all the filters and augmentation of images that happens. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to post a picture where I look like crap, but at the same time, I don't like to use filters, for example, or I'm very explicit if I do. Nothing that actually alters my images. It might be more like a color kind of thing. And I'm open with my audience about that. And the thing is that though, it can be so subtle, and it's not just comparison of images or bodies, but also of our lifestyle. And so this can also make you feel like, oh, she just eats such normal food and she looks like that because the girl posts these beautiful pictures of herself eating her pizza and her French fries. And like, you don't know what she's actually eating in the end. That's not to say that you shouldn't be able to eat the pizza and the French fries, because that's exactly what I teach people to be able to eat what they like and crave, but not in a way that makes them not feel good. But it is absolutely apparent that these images that are surrounding us affect our, as a perception of reality, how we treat ourselves and how we talk to ourselves. And that connects to what something I'm so passionate about, which is the mindset component of nutrition. Because as a certified nutritionist, obviously I can talk all day about food and the components of food. I can do all the new nutritional macronutrient breakdowns, help you to understand foods for longevity, anti-aging, bloating, whatever you want to know. But at the end of the day, what I saw was so missing in the space were people that were focused on, yes, teaching you how you can build a balanced plate, deal with whatever restrictions you may have, whether it's time restrictions, just overall food preferences or not. But if you feel like crap about yourself, if you aren't prioritizing yourself, if you don't have proper boundaries, if you are trying to cope with emotional things and just always turn to food, if you deal with any one or multiple of those things plus more, right? you're still going to utilize food not just as nourishment. And I believe food is more than just fuel, but so many of us use it for way, way more than fuel. We use it literally as our friend. We use it because we don't want to deal with other shit that's going on in our life. And so it's much easier to just like eat the food and get that temporary dopamine rush and feel good about ourselves. And then we feel like crap about ourselves later.
I have to stop you there because I resonate with that so much with what you said, because I use that sometimes too. And that's something that I've been working on personally is, okay, why is it that I am always attracted to food? Oh, it's because I need to fulfill something in my life. But that's not going to fulfill me in just the long term. I'm thinking just immediate short-term burst of dopamine or sugar, whatever the case is, as I'm literally holding a soda right now. The audience doesn't see that, but you see that. But yeah, I get that, because sometimes we're so stuck in what those things are, because those are the comforts, I feel, of what we might have been attuned to growing up. I mean, didn't you say to me just earlier about being in high school and kind of having that sort of thought process too of, well, everybody else is doing it. I don't really feel comfortable eating food though, because I want to have this slim image. I felt that way too in high school.
Yeah.
I actually, and I've let my audience know this, that I even refused to go to the lunch table to eat in front of others. I was just so ashamed of that.
Yeah. And we know that we think about ourselves way more than others are thinking about us. But at the same time, especially in young adolescents, there's just so much one-upping culture, but that it's less obvious as we get older, but it's still there. And we need to be honest with ourselves and what our true intentions are, because there's nothing wrong with wanting to lose weight. Most of the women who come to me, who I work with, do want to lose weight, but they need to have a bigger why, and they need to be doing it for the right reasons and in the right way. If you're just wanting to lose weight because you want to fit into the jeans from high school, well, your body's changed and you should not be comparing yourself to your high school body. I've had times when people come to me for coaching. It's like, well, I used to look like this and whatever. Well, I'm like, when was that? They're like, oh, when I was like 18. You shouldn't be looking like that anymore. You're a woman now. You're not a teenager. And that's amazing. That's beautiful. But there's nothing wrong with having aesthetic goals. And that's where I kind of took issue with some of the intuitive eating practitioners. And again, I think intuitive eating is fantastic, and just those principles on their own, people can just do intuitive eating and that works for them. But then there's almost a demonizing in the intuitive eating community of then wanting to care about your aesthetics or like anything wrong with losing weight. There's nothing wrong with losing weight, again, if it's done in a healthy manner and if it's done for the right reasons. And so I want to give women and empowerment women in that way.
Yeah. And finding the right reason to do that is often the biggest challenge, because we're all having these ideas and we're having these viewpoints that are swimming around us and also hitting us in the face of, you must do this, you must do that. And that can be challenging to stay consistent with that. And what you said made me think of this to ask you, because I often have this happen to me too, where I fall off the path. And for my listeners, actually, what I'll do is I will have a picture of me when I actually did the counting the calories sort of diet and lost over 100 pounds. I got to be about 155, 160, Casey. I was completely different from what I am today, from what you said. But do you feel that when people are trying to set these goals, they sell themselves a little short? And what I mean by asking that question is they think like, oh, well, if I just lose 20 pounds, I'll feel a lot better about myself. I feel like there's so much more to it than just putting a number to it. Because I think every time that we hear as a culture about, oh, get to the next diet, lose 50 pounds in 6 to 8 weeks. Well, there's a lot of numbers being thrown around and a lot of assumptions. So what do you say to those sort of commercials or that dispelment? I know there's so much social media out there that kind of tries to push that even today. How do you message differently with that and get people to come on board, especially women that you work with?
Yeah. So, I mean, my messaging is pretty clear online that I'm not like a lose weight fast coach or practitioner. But the thing is that still there can be some ambiguity. It's like, okay, yeah, I don't feel good. I want to stop yo-yoing. I want to stop in this struggle, but I don't know what I want to do or how to do this. So we clear up their why, right? Is the why because you are feeling so exhausted, you're feeling so depleted of energy, you want to stop in this rat race, this yo-yo cycle, you're noticing the inflammation doing your body. Like, we need to list the whys, and those whys, there can be some whys that are related to your physical appearance, but we need to have most of them not related to that, because your physical appearance, particularly your weight on the scale, is going to fluctuate. That doesn't mean that the overall trend isn't going to be going downward, but it's going to fluctuate. So if you're just using your weight on the scale as your worth and as your means of your success, you are going to be disappointed. So that doesn't mean that you can never weigh yourself, but I don't want you weighing yourself all the time. I don't want that to be your main motivator or your main indicator of success. Instead, what we want to do is say, like, if from physical motivators, better things would be like in terms of muscle building. It could be how clothes are fitting, but even more like how you're able to now run longer or lift heavier weights or try that new exercise class from certain physical perspective. And from food, like going out to eat and not feeling so freaking full after, understanding how to use the hunger fullness scale so that you're able to eat in tune with your body and be mindful. How can you be able to wake up with energy, get better sleep, feel more hydrated? Maybe it's just getting in more vegetables. Maybe you're noticing the different colors on your plate that you're getting. You have better digestion. You're pooping better. You're pooping regularly.
Everybody poops. Remember
yeah,
that,
everybody poops. But it's true. We really need to understand that our health is so much greater than the physical. Then that doesn't mean we can't include the physical as a metric of success. Because yeah, it's going to be motivating, and there's nothing, again, as I said, and I'll say for the millionth time, there's nothing wrong with having that be a motivator. But if we're just so stuck up on that, we're going to be continually disappointed. Because also there's parts that are so out of our control. As we age, our body's going to change in ways that we like and don't like. And if you're equating all of your success with just your physical appearance, it's going to be really freaking hard to be happy.
I resonate with that so much personally. I don't know about my audience, but I'm speaking for myself for a second. I'm being a little selfish. I resonate with that because I was always ashamed, even standing in front of a mirror and being like, why can't I just look at myself and be beautiful the way I am? And I know that's kind of weird because a male is saying that, and I get that, but it's the same principle. I think that men go through this too. So my men audience out there, I think Casey's saying some good stuff here to think about. You know, it isn't just about the colors on your plate. It's not just about the things that you put in your body. It's about how you really feel about yourself. So I think it's so important to do that. But I want to talk about your business. So I love this business name, Your Case for Wellness. And obviously it's a play on your first name, C-A-S-E, as opposed to C-A-S-E-Y. First off, you could have said to yourself, yeah, I'm getting this certification. I could go work for a company. I could help other people realize their fitness, nutritional goals through this. And I've had fitness instructors on the show, and even those that are owners, and they tell about their novel story and their concept, which you have an awesome opportunity to work with other people as well. But why? Why start your own business? There's thousands of these people out here, Casey. And I know that seems a little cliche-ish to be like, well, there's already these other people. Why are you in business? But honestly, why do you do what you do? And I know you touched on this earlier, but remind us again why you're doing this for yourself and the business that you started. What's the impact that you're making?
Yeah, so I just know what it's like to struggle and feel so stuck and that there's no way out. And it was so scary as someone who had dieted for years and restricted. And that's the only way that I saw success in liking how I looked, to step away from dieting. That feels really freaking scary. And the only way I was able to do that was when I was able to get the guidance of someone, because you have a container of security. The calorie counting, the macro counting, the diet plan gives you this false sense of security because it's like a boundary. It's a metric of success that you can say, I checked the boxes, I did this, whatever for the day. So when you will go away from that, it's really freaking scary. Yeah. You're like, what means success? What am I supposed to do? Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it bad? Is it good? Which I like to get away from those black and white, the kind of thinking anyway.
Yes or no, maybe so. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, stay away from those. Try to, at least.
Exactly. And so my whole goal is to empower women. That's what I do every day, so that you can be able to achieve your health and goals and not feel like you're on this constant yo-yo struggle. So you can achieve health for the rest of your life and your longevity. Because when women work with me, they work with me for a certain period of time, and their goal and what my aim is they work with me and then they move on from working with me and they don't have to work with me again because they have the skills for the rest of their life. Versus, how many times have you downloaded MyFitnessPal and then stopped using it and then had to go back to using it? How many times have you went back to Weight Watchers? How many times have you went back to keto, low carb, getting the meal delivery service because you have to keep going back to it because you think like, oh, well, it worked that time. Well, if it worked, you wouldn't have to keep going back. It would have worked. It would have been done, right? I want to get people out of struggle. I want them to stop with the same things that are causing them so much pain. Because as I talked about before, it is as much physical as mental pain and struggle, even probably more mental pain and struggle, right? And our health and our brain and our mindset are so intertwined, and it is not recognized enough. It is not approached in a way that is a whole body holistic approach. And that is why so many of us are failing. We are truly just failing at being healthy because we either think of health as just weight loss, and it's not our fault. That is what's being shown to us in the media. And like, think about it, the doctor just puts you on a scale and says with your BMI, whether or not you're healthy. And that's not true either.
No.
It has nothing to do, like not nothing. There are correlations for sure. Of course, there's correlations. But it is by no means the be all end all. And so much of our healthcare system is, like, most of it is not preventative. Yeah. It's great to have the options once you are sick, of course. But what are we doing to not get there in the first place? Yes, again, if aesthetics can help motivate you to just be healthier, that's great. But we all know that there's more to health than just that. And so let's utilize that to our advantage.
You touch on something that I always think about, which is about 30 years ago, the documentary, which I know many people are going to probably message me afterwards and go, Josh, can't believe you bring this up, but Supersize Me. And that was sort of some of the premise of what Morgan Spurlock even said too, is that we are so worried about fixing what the problem is right now, but not doing anything preventatively. So no matter what people want to say about that, which I know some of it was staged and later was found out that some of it was staged, but to be honest, there were still some good points. And that's exactly what I feel 30 some years later, we are still talking about this and we haven't really done a good job of being preventative. So let's have that conversation now. Let me ask you, what are some things, especially for some of my people that are listening to this now, they might be thinking, yeah, Casey's got a point. And they look at themselves in the mirror and they go, I need to really start doing something now to prevent this from happening. What are some just easy things that they could do? And what are some things that maybe you even just say to other women that you take on as clients that you say to them that can be just some easy wins starting out?
Yeah. So one thing I would say that can be really beneficial is to have not a food journal with food, but to start a food thought journal. So before you eat, just try this for 2 days. Before you eat, how hungry do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10? And where are you location-wise? And what are you feeling before eating? You'll notice such a difference in terms of how this affects your eating behaviors. And it's about understanding patterns. Simply writing down what you ate in terms of like broad strokes, right? We're not getting into like measuring the half a cup of quinoa. So the thing is that this allows you to say, I'm realizing like whenever I sit down to my desk, I don't really think about what I'm eating and I just eat the whole thing. What's the best is then to do after you eat, also then check in with your scale of 1 to 10, how full you feel and like your emotions there. This provides a lot of perspective into what situations trigger you to eat certain types of foods. And this allows you to help do some self-coaching without even working with anyone, getting and recognizing your triggers and what may be leading to certain behaviors. Now, in terms of with actual food, I recommend to focus every meal and snack on protein, fat, and fiber-rich carbohydrates. So how can all of your meals have at least 20 plus grams of protein? That's the only thing I ever want you to think numbers-wise, and you don't need to count it out, but just be cognizant of it with portion sizes. That's roughly like if you're talking about meat, like that's roughly a deck of cards size of protein. It's like a cup of Greek yogurt, protein powder. It's like 4 ounces of tofu. So I can go on and on about different protein sources. And then get some fiber-rich carbohydrates. So that comes in plant foods. We can get fiber-rich carbohydrates in all sorts of veggies. In fruits, it's mostly berries are more fiber-rich carbohydrates. Other fruit is great, but not necessarily giving us our fiber. We get beans, legumes, lentils, and then fats. So let's get healthy fats of avocado, coconut, nuts and seeds, olives. And then from there, once we hit all of those nutritional baselines, then we add in other things to it. It's not about just having that, but how can we then add in the other things that we want to have to round out the meal for it to be delicious? So even if you're like, I want potato chips, okay, you want some potato chips. So how can we maybe pair them with almonds so that we get some healthy fats, a little bit of protein, or maybe you want a sweet and salty thing. So you have it with some jerky and chocolate chips, right? Like, whatever, making a sweet and salty kind of trail mix. That's not really trail mix, but you know what I mean? Like some type of situation. People have some weird questions for cravings and whatnot.
I was going to say, jerky and chocolate chips. I feel like I know what I'm doing after we're done recording here.
But so you want pasta. Great. But what can we maybe add some tofu or some chicken to it so that we get some protein? You're probably using butter and some cheese, which is going to give some fat on it. And then how can we get some fiber? Steam some broccoli or spinach and throw it in there. This will help us to naturally feel more satisfied. So we therefore have less cravings and our hormones are balanced, that we can have balanced blood sugar, which is key for overall longevity and health. And when we round out our meal, we are able to then not need to eat as much of the pasta without having this mindset of restriction. It's not like, oh my God, I can't eat the whole thing of pasta. But if you're just eating the pasta, if you're only eating butter noodles, you're going to have to eat a lot more than if you eat the butter noodles with some spinach and chicken. Again, we can get really creative with it, but you're going to need to eat more because you're not going to be satisfied because you're not going to have the other nutrients that signal the hormones in your body for satisfaction. Because otherwise, of course, you're going to want more and more. You're not feeding your body what it needs. So again, it's not about taking out the simple carbohydrates, the sweets, the treats that you have, but balancing them out in a way that honors your body, your health, and honestly provides more flavor for your food.
Yeah. And we want to have not only that enrichedness of all those different flavors, because let's face it, that's why even going all the way back in time, having some sort of sweetener, having some sort of salt, pepper. I mean, those are all combinations in which we did a lot of trade way back in colonial times that kind of built what society and what it is. And we still look out for those exotic tastes even today. So I think it's so true that we can build those combinations. And I literally wrote down weird combinations happen on my notes because I feel that we can have some weird opportunities, but those can be the most fulfilling opportunities when we can think of things that are unlike what traditional mainstream things usually we have that get slammed down our throat. We can try to do something different. We can like something different for even our bodies for that matter. So I love what you're saying because those are all true things. Casey, we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you this one final question because it's on my mind and it's been on my mind since even before we started recording because I was looking at some of your Instagram posts for your business and I was really profoundly shocked by what you looked like just about a decade or so ago, dealing with all the different things that you must have had going on. And I feel that our audience that listens to this has learned from many different other people the wide perspectives of what they do and how they achieve things. And I usually ask questions along those lines, but I want to ask you something a little bit different than I usually don't ask. So be ready for this. But when you're in the moment where you were just eating yourself alive essentially because you had all these disorders that you were dealing with. It seemed like to me that maybe you just weren't happy with maybe things that were going on. And I'm not asking you to talk about what was going on. What I'm actually asking you is think about who that person was before and who I'm talking to right now. What would you say is the biggest difference between your past version of yourself and who you are today? And from that, what would you say to our audience that if they're struggling with something like you have struggled with, can you give them some words of encouragement that maybe they can see the other side like you have?
Yeah, something that really resonates is nothing changes if nothing changes. And for me, it's very cliche, but the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And that's what I kept doing. It was disguised as something different, a different type of diet, a different type of exercise plan. And the thing though is it was all within the same category of dieting, of restriction, not digging deeper. And what we need to do is do the hard shit of recognizing what the root cause is of our eating behaviors. So for me, a lot of people, when they talk about eating disorders, there's certain things that are negatively going in their life. And there were certain things that obviously have happened, but it actually started really from a sense of control. And that's what a lot of times what happens is control, but maybe other things are out of control in your life. For me, when I originally started was when I wanted control in every aspect of my life because I was getting school records and track. I was getting the best grades I ever had. I felt like I could control every aspect of my life and I could control this as well. And it felt like I was on top of the world being able to control everything. And then it became a coping mechanism when things weren't going well. That was also something that I could control. And I bring that up because a lot of times people are like, well, it couldn't be an eating disorder because it's not like a mental health related thing because I'm not having bad things going in my life.
Yeah.
And that's not true. Like, obviously, it's just how we cope and deal with things. And it's something I've had to deal with in other ways. Like, I'm over it with food, but I still sometimes get a need for control in other ways in my life. But I'm very well aware that this is a thing. Like, I'm very well aware when it's happening. And so I'm able to talk myself through it, especially with my partner. He's well aware of it. And whenever something comes up and I'm like, this is because of my control. And we're like, yeah, like this is a thing. But when there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing to be ashamed of. We all struggle. Well, most of us struggle with food one way or another at some point of our life. I was so ashamed of it. I thought I was the only one. I thought asking for help was a sign of weakness. And if anything, it was such a sign of strength that I was able to recognize what was going on in my life. I was like, I know so much about nutrition. Like, why? Because I knew all the nutrition facts of things. I did all the granularity. I don't need help. And so I almost like a badge of honor. I can figure this out. And it just made me sink deeper and deeper into my own issues. So recognizing that asking for help is truly a sign of strength and being more accepting of other types of approaches, because your reluctance to it may be just the sign that it's something that could actually work for you.
Wow. I needed to hear that myself even in this moment, because I'm thinking, yeah, how many times that we're afraid to ask for help, and we need to have that help when we are going through that notion of, oh no, I know I'm going to slip into it. I slipped into it. But
Yeah.
I think that's why our practices, which we're both coaches, but we do different things with our coaching, I think it's so important to have that accountability factor. And I always overstress this with not only the people I interact with, but also the people that I think, I don't mean to shove it down their throat, but to say to them, I know what you're going through, and I just want you to know that you have somebody at least that's available to talk to. So,
Yeah.
Casey, I really appreciate that so much. I want to let you have a few minutes here. Can you tell the audience how they could reach out to you if they're interested in working with you, especially for my women audience? This is really for you to pay attention. Men, you can work with me. I'm sure I can find somebody too. We've had plenty of men on the show here that have done a lot of different types of coaching, but how can women reach out to you about your case for wellness? How can they get in contact with you? How they just go through that process? I'll give you the last few minutes to just give us a little bit of a pitch, if you will.
Yeah. So basically, I own and operate my own coaching practice where I do private and group coaching. Right now, I have a few slots open for private coaching. And what I do is I work with completely customizing plans for you, for your goals, for your body, for your needs. The cookie cutter approach is not working for you. If you are struggling, we need to stop this endless spiral, stop the confusion, stop the Google searching. That is not serving you. It is not empowering you to feel healthy in your body. It is just leading you down more and more of a rabbit hole, which makes it harder and harder to get out of. But there is a way to reverse it. There is a way to get out of that spiral. And so my most active platform is on Instagram. So definitely feel free to send me a DM. Would love to chat with you truly about anything. Any questions that you have, nutrition, health related. I'm your case for wellness, as you said. And I would love to give your listeners access to my free nutrition bundle, which has my top nutrition tips video as well as a Stop Overeating workbook so that they can kind of dive in themselves and be able to understand what may be at the root of their eating behaviors and how they can help themselves to feel happier, healthier, and more on top of their food decisions.
That's awesome. I think that there's a lot of people that will definitely get a lot out of that nutrition bundle that you're offering. I will put all those links of what Casey just mentioned into the episode notes. So for my listeners, please go check them out. Go check Casey out if you want to hire her. I highly encourage it, because to wrap up, Casey, I have to say to you, and I mentioned this, I never had anyone on the show yet that has talked about the nutrition side and kind of how they struggled with that to get to having this great success, which obviously you are having. And you inspire me just from my perspective because of what I am dealing with my own journey. But knowing that there's another side to it, to be able to help others, that just makes me feel so happy inside, knowing that you're doing that for not only just women, but I think you've inspired a lot of people just in general by the fact of your story, and really that we all have these sort of things in common. And we don't have to wait. We can start taking action and be preventative about it. That's really the biggest thing. So, Casey, with all that said, thank you so much for being on Speaking from the Heart. I really enjoyed our conversation. It was so educational, and really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation, and I look forward to chatting with your listeners in the future when they reach out.
I want to thank Casey again for being part of the show, but also opening herself up to talking about this important subject. Because when we look at the whole coaching atmosphere, it's not just about understanding why we do the physical things, why we do the mental things, but actually putting those together, which we've already had a few guests on this podcast explaining why that's so important to understand both those aspects, to be able to bridge those pieces together. But we have to understand that talking about this subject means that we have to watch people and what they have been through in terms of why they spiral out of control, and they use food instead of alcohol or drugs or sex or whatever else, so that we can get to the heart of really what is happening. Why are they going through all these different issues? It gets to the point that we have to understand the smaller versions of ourselves, the things that might be the microaggressions or the microchasms of what is happening, to be able to grow into this bigger, brighter version of herself. And I love that she talked about this concept of intuitive eating. It's about not only thinking about food differently, but how we can associate from a nutritional sense what we should have, but we can also enjoy what we shouldn't have also. It doesn't mean that we're always constantly putting poison in our bodies. It actually is rethinking the way in which we can have that relationship with food so that we can understand better how to connect the dots with our lives and our overall well-being. Because what we put inside of ourselves certainly dictates how we're going to feel throughout our day. If we're going to put in junk, expect junk to come out of it. Whether you're eating fast food, whether you're eating something that was frozen, whether it's something that you should have taken more time to consciously prepare. Having that ability to put aside that time is easier said than done to be able to create not only the best version of yourself, but the best food that you've ever had. So when we get to really talking about this overall premise of why it's so important to feed yourself right, it's also about how you can intuitively eat. But imagine having that mindset, being able to think of things more than just what food is all about, and being able to work on yourself. We have to fulfill that basic necessity, which in earlier episodes of this podcast, we talked about the concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Food is one of the basic premises that the human body, let alone the human condition, needs to have in order to keep on growing, to keep on moving forward. So if we're not getting the right food, if we're not getting the right nutrients, if we're not satisfying what that relationship is, of course we're never going to attain self-actualization, let alone even work on some of the skills development, the knowledge transfer, or even the abilities that we will need to be able to grow in our relationships, in our confidence, let alone even our determination for that matter. This big idea about having a better understanding of what food is and how it interacts with our human body is something that's still being studied constantly over and over and over again. We're always learning something new. What might be food that is really bad back then might be the next day something that is really good for us. And then in the future is not so good for us again. This yo-yo effect, which is happening in our culture, means that we need to be paying attention. We need to be able to work with others, just like Casey offers, to be able to learn to grow in the ways in which we are able to associate with food in a much better place. To be able to understand and feel good about why that aspect of food is needed for us. To be able to grow not only in a healthy way, but in a way in which we have a better relationship as a whole when it comes to our intake of better food. It's really not so funny if you think about it, because in many places, especially in the United States, you might have heard of this concept called a food desert, which we didn't really talk about in our interview today. But reading research and even seeing in my own backyard here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, about a food desert that exists in a certain portion of Carlisle makes me start to think about why it's so important to also have availability when people can't access food that is really good for them readily, to keep on working on the opportunity that exists to not only have those sort of choices available, but to be informed on how to make those choices. A local nonprofit called Project Share, which is near me too, literally blocks down the road. It really helps us to understand that with families that come in, go into a grocery store type format, but are given assistance to be able to make better choices of the food that they can feed their families, regardless of how many members of that family exist. Which is why it comes to a very important point. Despite the fact that you might have all this availability of choice and to be able to understand why it's so important to make better choices as a whole, you have to learn to step away from the scale, especially when your body might not be listening to what you are trying to do, in the physical sense. I can't tell you how many times, especially with me trying to work on myself and trying to lose all those extra pounds, that it isn't about how much I weigh. It's about what I'm doing to be more healthy about the food that I eat, the nutrients I'm gaining, but also understanding my chemistry of my body acts differently. And I know I'm not some sort of scientist, let alone not even nutritionist by trade. But I see it all the time, especially with some of my clients that are struggling, figuring out what's the best choice to make when it comes to not only the food that they're consuming, but also the people that they're interacting with. Because people, just like food, we have a choice to associate with. Having that ability to step away from the scale, though, especially when we think that it's all about how much we weigh in terms of pounds or kilograms, if you're one of my listeners from outside the United States, can be very hard. But you have to step away. Because when you step away from the junk food, from the scale, from all the expectations of what society says you should be, that can make such a big difference in what you're able to do. It destroys the body image of what everybody thinks you need to be, which Casey even touched on in today's interview. It's really important to learn not only to respect yourself, but also respect others in the grand scheme of things, which is why trying new things, trying different combinations might be your ticket to being successful. Don't believe me? I loved it when she said about having jerky with chocolate chips. Who would ever have thought of such a weird combination? It sounds really gross to me, but at the same time, let's make some weird combinations happen. When you think about the fact that you can mix diet soda with something in which you can even eat for breakfast with eggs and having a protein, you're still getting something in your body to digest, to be able to help you. Any nutritionist would tell you that even if it's the worst food, at least put something in your body to start the day, so that your metabolism starts up. But of course, many things come in moderation. Just as much as your relationships, your ability to communicate, the ability to grow in your career or your business, means that when you are diving into things consistently in which they're not helping you, of course you're going to get the results that you really desire. Are you doing the same thing over and over again? What is it that you're doing to change the messaging or to spice up the flavor of your life, for that matter? What can you be in control of today that will allow you to keep on growing, not just in the sense of you as an individual or your business, but I'm talking about the things that you might consume. Again, this episode proves yet another point about having somebody to help you point out those differences. As I record this, I had attended a vendor event in which somebody walked up to my booth in which I was representing my business, Your Speaking Voice LLC, saying that they worked at a call center and that they didn't need my help whatsoever. But I clearly remember what I shouted at them as they were turning to leave. If you ever need that help, though, to get out of what you really are destined to be, let me know when you're ready, because I will be here to help you. We get so entrapped with the same routine over and over and over again. But it also means, in a health coaching context, being able to understand if those things are really trying to help you. So if there's anything that you could ever glean from being able to learn from other people's experiences, it's this. Don't ever, never underestimate the importance of being able to grow with somebody else's input, their opinion, their feedback, in order for you to destroy what might be standing in your way. Even if you've been struggling for a long time, even like our guest today, just know that getting to the other side of that fence means that you can break down barriers that you normally wouldn't ever think you could destroy. It means being able to learn about a new way in which you're thinking about not just the things that you're dealing with when it comes to food, not just the holistic behaviors or mindsets that might be toxic in nature, but it means actually examining what you can potentially do if you're just willing to work on the smaller pieces of what it's all about. Intuitive eating is just yet another toolbox to add to your ever-growing list of tools that will help you to keep on understanding, to keep on fueling that future that you always deserve to have, even if you think you never deserved to have it in the first place. Imagine what it would look like if you change your mindset just because of the food that you eat, even if it is jerky and chocolate chips. Because, hey, any weird combination can make such a big difference. And it has been because of weird combinations that we've been able to have the most wildest of inventions, the most wildest of dreams achieved, and even having people feeling so successful about what they're doing. Because let's face it, if you think eating ice cream and eating that whole package of bacon is going to make you feel better, remember that there might be better choices out there if you decide that you're going to intuitive eat your way to not only your dreams, but to have the confidence, determination, and the relationships to keep on fueling what you really desire to have, because you deserve to have it. Thanks for listening to episode number 114 of Speaking from the Heart, and I look forward to hearing from your heart very soon.
Thanks for listening. For more information about our podcast and future shows, search for Speaking from the Heart to subscribe and be notified wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit us at www.yourspeakingvoice.biz for more information about potential services that can help you create the best version of yourself. See you next time.